Christmas time, a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable time. Indeed, Christmas time is not the time when most of the populace expects to hear a ghost story. But I will endeavor in this ghostly little story to raise the ghost of an idea, which shall not put you out of humor with yourselves, with each other, with the season, or with me. I only wish that it might haunt you pleasantly. For Christmas time is a pleasant time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts and to think of all people as fellow passengers to the grave. And therefore, though Christmas has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. And so I say, God bless it. On a cold and foggy Christmas Eve, old, tight-fisted, and covetous Ebenezer Scrooge sat busy in the shivering chill of his counting house. In the dismal cell that was the next room, his clerk, Bob Cratchit, worked by a stove, the flame kept barely alive with less than one lump of coal to fuel the flickering ember. That afternoon, Scrooge reluctantly looked up as a visitor entered his office.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle.
It was Scrooge's nephew Fred, who had arrived full of the spirit of Christmas.
Oh, come dine with us tomorrow, Uncle.
It was a generous invitation to which Ebenezer Scrooge sternly replied,
Bah, humbug.
Sorry to find you so resolute, but I will keep my Christmas humor to the last. So good night to you, Uncle.
As Fred left, two people, pleasant to behold, arrived at the door with their hats in hand, seeking to collect charitable donations for the poor.
What could I put you down for, Mr. Scrooge?
Nothing.
You wish to remain anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. Are there no prisons? Are there no union workhouses?
Yes, but many can't go there and most would rather die.
If they had rather die, they had better do it. Decrease this surplus population.
Scrooge dismissed the two men without giving them a penny. After closing up for the day and begrudgingly giving Bob Cratchit the next day off for Christmas, Scrooge retired to his gloomy home. As he slid his key into the lock of the front door, an apparition appeared in the door knocker. It was the ghostly face of his former partner, Jacob Marley, who had died 7 years before that very night. As Scrooge entered into his dark, cold house, he stepped cautiously up the stairs and locked himself in his room. He sat down in his chair and began to eat his gruel. Soon he noticed the faint ringing of an unused bell that hung in the corner. One by one, every bell in the house began to ring out, and ring out loudly. Suddenly, Scrooge heard footsteps heavily thumping up the stairs, and with them a clanking noise, as if a person was dragging a heavy chain. A figure floated through the locked door. It was Jacob Marley, bound in chains, and dragging behind him a trail of cash boxes, keys, ledgers, deeds, padlocks, and more chains wrought in steel. Though he saw the death-cold phantom standing before him, Scrooge fought against his senses and growled,
"You're a humbug, I tell you. Humbug!"
I have wandered the earth for 7 years as punishment for neglecting the needs of my fellow men. I have come to warn you that you have a chance and hope of escaping this same fate. You will be haunted by 3 spirit Scrooge. Expect the first tomorrow when the clock tolls 1.
Then the ghost of Marley floated out through an open window into the bleak, dark night. Scrooge slammed shut the window, went straight to bed without undressing, and exhausted fell asleep upon the instant. Scrooge awoke. It was still quite dark and extremely cold. Perplexed and deeply bothered with a mix of dread and astonishment, as he thought and thought of Marley's ghost, he asked himself,
Was it a dream or not?
As the clock struck 1 with a deep melancholy toll, Scrooge all of a sudden recalled Marley's promise of the first ghostly visit. At that, the curtains of his bed were drawn apart by a strange childlike figure, dressed in white, from whose head sprung a bright, clear jet of light.
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
Scrooge asked the glittering figure.
No, your past.
And what brought you here?
You're so fair. Rise and walk with me.
Taking Scrooge's hand, the two gently floated through the window. Instantly, the ghost transported Scrooge to the countryside where he had been raised. The city had vanished, as had the darkness and mist.
What you see are but shadows of the things that have been,
said the ghost. Recognizing every gate, post, and tree, Scrooge was brought to his old school, empty but not quite deserted. Indeed, Scrooge wept as he saw his poor forgotten self as he used to be, a solitary child left behind. The ghost motioned toward the classroom door. It opened, and a little girl darted in. It was Scrooge's little sister, Fan.
Father has brought me in a coach to bring you home, dear brother, home forever.
Scrooge reminisced sadly that Fan had died as a woman some years ago, and had one child, his nephew Fred. But that moment, the schoolhouse was left behind them, and Scrooge and the ghost were now in the busy thoroughfares of the city, at a certain warehouse door. The ghost asked Scrooge if he knew it.
Know it. I was apprenticed here.
They watched as a jolly Christmas party ensued, with dancing, singing, and merriment all around. Ebenezer, now a grown young man, and his fellow apprentice, Dick Wilkins, were leading the way, and with them the jovial old merchant Fezziwig. During the whole of this time, old Scrooge's heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self, he remembered everything, and he enjoyed everything.
Quickly now, my time grows short.
The scene faded to the past. Scrooge immediately saw himself at a different time, when he was slightly older, in the prime of life. There was an eager, greedy, restless light in his eye. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young woman named Belle, in whose eyes there were tears.
You have changed, Ebenezer. A golden idol has replaced me, and I release you with a full heart for the love of who you once were.
Scrooge and the ghost watched as she handed him back her golden engagement ring.
Spirit, why do you torture me? No more, no more.
He cried, but there was more. Taken to a more recent Christmas, Scrooge saw now the same belle, now comely middle-aged matron, surrounded by her delightsome and loving family. As he watched, Scrooge was flooded with a dreadful awareness that he was quite alone in the world. Tormented by these scenes from his past, Scrooge exclaimed,
Enough, Spirit. Take me back. Haunt me no longer.
The light of the ghost was extinguished. Immediately, he was back in his own room and sank into a deep sleep. Suddenly, Scrooge awoke, as again the bell was upon the stroke of 1. Scrooge rose from his bed, trembling at the sight of light emanating from the next room. The old hearth was ablaze, the room transformed. Holly, mistletoe, and ivy hung all about. Sitting on a throne of meats, red-hot chestnuts, fruits, plum puddings, cakes, and seething bowls of punch, was a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore in her hand a torch shaped like a cornucopia.
Come in, and know me better, man. I'm the ghost of Christmas present.
Boomed the joyful spirit, who was dressed in a deep green robe bordered in white fur.
Spirit, I went forth last night and learned a valuable lesson. Tonight, if you want to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe.
The room melted away to reveal the simple home of Bob Cratchit and his humble Christmas Day dinner. In came Bob with Tiny Tim on his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch and has his limbs supported by an iron brace. With his contented family gathered around the hearth, Bob proposed a toast.
Merry Christmas, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
Scrooge quietly asked with an interest he had never felt before.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
Scrooge and the spirit stood alone in an open space. It had been a long night. Strangely, while Scrooge remained unchanged in his outward form, the ghost appeared older. Looking upon the aged ghost, Scrooge was surprised to notice a pair of wretched, starving children who appeared from beneath her great robe.
Their names are Ignorance and Want, and they belong to man.
Have they no refuge or resource?
The ghost mocked Scrooge with his own words.
Are there no prisons? Are there no union houses? Are there no prisons? Are there no union houses? Are there no prisons? Are there no union houses?
The clock struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. At the last stroke of midnight, Scrooge beheld a solemn phantom, darkly draped and hooded, coming towards him like a mist along the ground. Bending to his knee, Scrooge asked,
Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come?
The spirit answered not, but pointed downward with his outstretched hand.
Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as it is, I know that you are to do me good. As I hope to be a better man from who I was. I will bear your company, and I will do it with a thankful heart.
The phantom moved away as it had come, and Scrooge followed in its shadow, which bore him up and carried him along. With that, the city seemed to spring up and encompass them of its own accord, and they stood before the stock exchange, where a cluster of men were carelessly discussing the death of a rich business acquaintance.
It's likely to be a cheap funeral. To upon my life, I don't know if anybody who will go to it,
said one fellow with a yawn.
I'm not tender for lunches provided.
Observed another with a laugh, a cold, aloof, and unforgiving laugh. They left the busy scene and went to a foul and narrow part of town, to a dingy, filthy pawn shop. The rascally owner, old Joe, and some shady characters bartered over a collection of personal belongings stolen from some dead man. Scrooge was shuddering from head to foot.
Spirit, I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own.
The ghost spread its dark robe before him like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed poor Bob Cratchit's home. Once again, this time it was very quiet. The Cratchit family was gathered tenderly by the fireplace, but Tiny Tim was missing, gone, his little crutch lying as a memorial upon the mantel. Scrooge was moved with compassion. Pondering the scenes of his night, he asked the ghost,
Spirit, who is the man whose things were bartered and about whom had left?
In but a misty moment, he found himself in an overgrown, weed-choked graveyard. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to a neglected tomb. Trembling, Scrooge crept toward it, and following the finger, read upon the gravestone his own name.
Heaven.
Shaking and clutching at the spirit's robe, Scrooge cried out,
Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I once was. I will honor Christmas in my heart and vow to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach, or tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone.
Mysteriously, the form began to shrink. Wide-eyed, Scrooge watched as it collapsed. It became ever smaller, dwindled down, and transformed into a bedpost. Yes, the bedpost was his own.
I will live in the past, present, and the future.
Scrooge repeated as he scrambled into bed.
The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and Christmas time be praised.
Scrooge's heart swelled. He opened his window and, laughing and crying in the same breath, began to shout,
Merry Christmas to one and all.
He called downward to a passing boy, promising a shilling and a half crown to deliver a huge Christmas turkey to the Cratchit house. Scrooge dressed himself in his best and then went out upon the street, greeting everyone he met with a good-humored and delighted smile. He happened upon the gentleman who had been collecting for charity the day before. He offered them his deepest apology for his previous behavior, and he pledged them a huge donation. Scrooge then found himself at Fred's door, and knocking, asked if he could come to dinner. It was a wonderful party with wonderful games and wonderful, wonderful happiness. But the next morning, Scrooge arrived early at the office to catch Bob Cratchit 18 and a half minutes late in his arrival. Feigning anger, Scrooge began to scold Bob, and then suddenly laughed.
Merry Christmas, Bob. Merry Christmas to you that I have given you any year, my good man. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family. Light up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another eye, Bob Cratchit.
Indeed, Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and definitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was the second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. May that truly be said of all of us. And so as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us, everyone.